challenge to the romantic notion of the American dream and a musical exploration of the American soundscape. Each of the 6 works on this program begs the question, what does it mean to be American? The program opens with Winter Spirits by the late composer Catherine Hoover. This work is inspired by the Southwestern Hopi indigenous people. The flute is heard calling forth the benevolent winter spirits, and I find myself thinking of the many instances within American subcultures where music is used as a way to connect with one's ancestors. I am myself incredibly fortunate to play on the flute that previously belonged to Catherine Hoover. And so in playing her work, I imagine that I am calling forth her great creative spirit and carrying forth this lineage of beautiful flute music. Purple Bamboo Melody is an ancient traditional Chinese tune transcribed for the Western flute by my friend and brilliant colleague, Leanna Keith. In preparing this piece, I worked to balance an informed understanding of traditional Chinese classical music with my own lived experience of performing predominantly Western classical music. What I will perform will certainly not be a perfect representation of the original melody, but instead a cultural translation with one foot in each tradition. I believe that the best of America exists in the space of mutual cross-cultural learning, and I hope to ethically explore that space in my presentation of this work. Margarita Zelenaya wrote Solitude after moving to the US with her son. Her husband remained in Russia in order to support the family, and so Zelenaya, as many immigrants, found herself quite lonely in a new country without a support system. The first and third movements of this work capture the lyrical and meditative moments of solitude, and she describes the middle movement as a surreal march wherein one sitting alone can imagine the shadows that wander around the room, moving from one wall to another in a strange marching rhythm, approaching or receding. I include this work not only as a consideration of the American immigrant experience, but also as an acknowledgement of the solitude and the loneliness that many of us may have experienced these past several months during the COVID-19 quarantine. I lived in Tucson, Arizona for a decade, and so I experienced firsthand the ways that the American-Mexican border disrupts the historic pattern of human movement. We know also that the border has been detrimental to natural animal migration patterns. To a butterfly, for instance, there is no distinction between South, Central, and North America. Valerie Coleman's Danza de la Mariposa, or Dance of the Butterfly, depicts the varied species of American butterfly all over the continent, alternating between dance-like syncopation inspired by Argentinian tango and lamenting melodies influenced by the Peruvian Yaraví. Danza paints a sonic landscape that is as joyful, as beautiful, and as diverse as America itself. Ruth Crawford Seeger was the first female composer to ever win the Guggenheim Fellowship, which she used to travel to Paris and Berlin to study music composition. She is best known for her work with the Library of Congress, preserving, transcribing, and teaching traditional American folk music. Several of her children, including Mike Seeger, Peggy Seeger, and Pete Seeger, were well known in their own right as integral to the American folk revival. Crawford Seeger did not shy away from the socio-political in her compositions, claiming at one point that it was almost immoral to closet oneself in one's comfortable room and compose music simply for its own delight. Many of her works either explicitly or implicitly addressed American racism and xenophobia. Her diaphonic Suite No. 1 for solo flute, written in 1930, shows evidence of a number of compositional techniques, including expanded serialism, that we popularly credit to male composers who came decades later. Crawford Seeger is included on this program as a celebration of everything an American artist should be: innovative, brilliant, and unapologetically committed to liberation. My program closes with Adolphus Hailstork's Pied Piper of Harlem. Hailstork's work typically blends African American musical practices with European traditions, and Pied Piper of Harlem is no exception. It sets the story of the medieval rat catcher of Hamelin in the New York borough of Harlem, one of the homes of jazz and hip-hop music. The original Pied Piper story tells of a piper who was hired by the Hamelin mayor to rid the town of rats. Despite the piper's success, the mayor reneges on his promise of payment, and so the piper kidnaps all the children of the town. Is this original story real? Who knows, but interestingly, to this day, there is a street in modern Hamelin where it's believed the children were last seen, and so music and dancing is not allowed on this street in reverence for the stolen children. In Hailstork's version, however, music and dancing abound as the children are enticed to get on board the A train to the magic land of Harlem. There's even a direct musical quote of the famous Duke Ellington jazz standard, which was penned, of course, in collaboration with a young, and then unknown, Pittsburgher named Billy Strayhorn. By ending my program with this piece, I invite all of us, whether in Pittsburgh or Harlem or anywhere else in our great country, to come together and celebrate the very best of what it means to be American and awake.